Hey there, and welcome to GamEntropy, where we ask the question of what makes a game tick. So, video games have come a long way as a means of telling a story.
We've moved from a period where plot could only be expressed in a few sentences of broken, mangled English, and reached a place where characters can be expressed through both complex dialogue and vivid animation.
But despite all these advancements, there are few titles that can be enjoyed by just anyone. Many games are bombastic by design, relying on fantastic devices which,
while sometimes ingenious, overshadow the experience to the point where the plot is merely there to service the game. Or result in characters and events which are impossible to relate to, almost universally serving to empower the character, and through them, the player.
Not to say these are inherently bad things, but because so many games are focused on the outrageous, they often compromise narrative depth. As a result, we don't have many titles out there that could be called the Citizen Kanes or Blade Runners or Clockwork Oranges of game narrative. So what do we have? What are some of the games that any layperson could approach and try to get a sense of appreciation for what they're trying to say?
And, before we start, just to set a couple of conditions. First, these games are, of course, ones that I've played, so if it's not on the list, it's possible that I have not yet played it. The story is entertaining on its own terms, but doesn't really carry any staying power.
It looks like a dinosaur. There's got to be a logical explanation.
Or that the story just isn't that good on any scale. Secondly, I'm focusing on titles that focus on single-character-oriented action. So, no RPGs. While I love the genre, and may examine it on its own terms another time, the storytelling techniques and approaches are very different, and would be like comparing Lord of the Rings to Silence of the Lambs. They're both great movies, but just no. Just no.
Lastly, while my intention isn't to ruin these games for anyone, I'm not going to be shy about them either, so there will be some spoilers.
If a game comes up that you, the viewer, have not played yet, we'll have the starting time of the next segment listed on the bottom.
In which case, feel free to skip ahead.
Number 10. Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. The Sands of Time comes in at number 10 by way of a story that is not especially complex, but rather one that is supported by a pair of strong, well-defined characters. The story of The Sands of Time is held up by the strength of the title character, and how he changes and grows as events progress. Themes of trust and love are prevalent throughout the story, as are the ideas of honor and glory, and how the protagonist views these things at the beginning of the story versus the ending. The mechanics of Prince of Persia center around the idea of undoing mistakes, and the weight of these mechanics fall into the tale as well. The relationship between the prince and the captured Princess Farah is not the product of love at first sight, but rather the end result of two people coming to understand one another. All these elements cull together in an ending that is bittersweet and meaningful, with a lead character who has matured for his experiences, even as he loses some of what he thought he had gained by his trials. A great portion of Prince of Persia's charm comes from just how the story is told, as an actual story being told to an avid listener and through her, the player. This is reinforced at times even when the player pauses the game.
Shall I go on?
Saves their progress.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
Or even dies.
No, that didn't happen either. Let me begin again.
All to keep the experience consistent to its format. It may not be a complex tale, but it is nonetheless one well told, and manages to hang on the list at number 10. Number 9. Heavy Rain. Heavy Rain is an anomaly among video games for the very reason that it would be common in actual cinema. The world and events of Heavy Rain are grounded. Aside from a little wonder technology that exists on fringe elements of the story and has no impact on the overall proceedings, Heavy Rain's plot deals with weighty themes surrounding the loss of a child and the role of a father. The focal character is not some Superman figure who can punch a hole through anything that offends him. In fact, all the characters are brought down to earth as each suffers from some minor affliction or problem with their health. The fears that all the characters have are based on reality rather than abstracts, making their scenarios easy to follow and relate to. Heavy Rain is structured more like an intricate series of interactive cutscenes, rather than a full game with free movement. But because the scenario, which is impressively structured, offers so many possible outcomes based on who can live or die, and what mistakes can be made, this is precisely why it works as a game and not anything else. Even if it's meant to be viewed more than played, the player cannot simply put the controller down to do so. It's true a few of the plot elements don't quite go anywhere, based on things that were cut out of the final game. And some of the trials Ethan Mars is put through feel like they were ripped right out of the Saw movies. Though, thankfully, not the Saw games. Heavy Rain has nonetheless a solid story, and is a credit to what can be done with the media. Number 8. Uncharted 2, Among Thieves. Sharp characters, fantastic environments, and exciting sequences are standard for the Uncharted series, but Among Thieves stands tall above the rest. Few protagonists in gaming are as relatable as Nathan Drake, not because of the life he leads, but because of how he leads it. Drake may be more capable than any of us would be, but he still handles every crisis with as much grace as any of us would. He panics in tense moments and catches his breath when they've passed. Drake's life is, with little exaggeration, the gaming equivalent to Indiana Jones. And while the thrill of any good action film is as much in the story as it is in the action itself, part of the thrill of experiencing Among Thieves' story is in how much it earnestly keeps the player involved with every thrill and spill along the way. Of course, this does bring up the matter of how much good gameplay is allowed to constitute a story. But in any good action movie, every exciting sequence can be treated as part of the experience, as long as it has a role in the sequence of events. And, true to form, Uncharted 2 satisfies this idea nicely. The Uncharted series has largely functioned because every installment works on its own as much as with other entries, but Among Thieves is the most well-paced in plot, as well as the most consistently laid out regarding its exciting set pieces. It takes the player for an exciting ride, coming in easily at number 8. Number 7. Spec Ops The Line. That Spec Ops The Line extols not the virtues, but the horrors of war, would be enough in itself to make the game remarkable in a military shooter-driven market. But it does more. Considerably more. Spec Ops' narrative works not just as a video game, but specifically because it's a video game. In some regards, more so than any other game on this list. If Spec Ops could be summed up in a single word, it would be consequences. Actions committed and choices made all have consequences, and they are never meant to be pleasant. The player is not given a choice where one action can ever be deemed morally better than the other. Other times, the pressure placed on the player is so high that there seems to be no good choice. Choices made will routinely get people killed, and the game never portrays war as a happy, consequence-free scenario. Spec Ops takes the idea of heroism and spits on it. Not through acts of villainy, but through acts of well-intended ignorance. Rather than use the game's choices to define the ending, the dilemmas presented in Spec Ops contextualize the experience as a whole. This game has been called the Apocalypse Now of video games, and it definitively earns that title. Number 6. Silent Hill: Shattered Memories. Shattered Memories is a strange game, one that masquerades in the characters of the first title in the series, but is full of ideas and events that are entirely its own. In many ways, this is a Silent Hill game in name only, abandoning the occult themes to explore something more intimate and human. Shattered Memories aims to discomfort the player, asking frank questions on the outset, and using what it learns about you to shape the experience. The lens through which each player views the story is likely to be a little bit different. But the tale consistently explores difficult themes of people growing apart, the idea of how the memory of someone can become more intense than the reality, to the deeper effects of these actions, and how love, lust, and loss can become entangled and confused. But, more than anything, this game is about how painful it can be to let go of someone. While the meaning of the outcome can vary, the revelations in Shattered Memories are consistently heartbreaking. The game experience isn't perfect, with the chase sequences being almost universally miserable to slog through. But Silent Hill Shattered Memories has one of those rare stories that everyone should experience at least once. Number 5. Bioshock. Bioshock is a game that stands out for more than just its characters or conundrums, but for its exploration of a philosophical idea. Few games open on such grandeur and use that spectacle to make such a scathing indictment. Bioshock's story is built around objectivist philosophy, and brings the player into a seeming utopia turned underwater hell, where the unhindered rights of the individual have created a ruined city of psychotic drug addicts. One can certainly read Bioshock as a staunch critique of objectivism, and one wouldn't be wrong to do so, but the game never attempts to tell you what to think. One of Bioshock's central tenets is the subject of free will, not just in actuality, but in perception as well. Bioshock's strengths lay not in the choices you actively make, but in the ones you don't realize you're making. While the game features a small, albeit interesting cast of characters, only one really stands out as being iconic and memorable. Nonetheless, Bioshock shines for its grander themes and ideas and takes an important position at number 5. Number 4. Catherine. Catherine was poised to be one of those unique, memorable titles well before its release, and it did not disappoint. While the game is decidedly locked into the male gaze, it does so with purpose and looks at the fears and insecurities a modern man might face today. Catherine explores the ideas of freedom and commitment, and the responsibility that comes with deciding what to do with one's life. How relationships can affect the course of our lives, and what responsibilities come along with them in getting older. In short, Catherine is a game about being grown up and coming to appreciate what that means. Catherine as a game offers no clear answer to these questions or what being a grown-up means, instead asking the player the questions, however extreme, and providing some potential clarity for it. Although the game utilizes capricious deities to catalyze and guide the plot on the broad scale, these elements are largely restrained and avoid becoming distracting for it. Catherine's subject, elements, and genre make it something of an anomaly today, but the execution of these things is what makes it such a welcome addition to this list. Number 3. Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. It's easy to brush Max Payne 2 off for what it is on the surface, a barrage of bullets and hard-boiled narrative where style could have easily outweighed substance. The Fall of Max Payne explores conventional themes, love, revenge, and redemption, and tackles them in unconventional ways. Characters pursuing revenge in the name of murdered family members are a dime a dozen, but seldom do we see a character who has realized their revenge, only to find that their lives haven't gotten any better. The love story in Max Payne 2 is compelling because it's torn in so many directions, both between the protagonist's want for what he lost and his desire for what's right in front of him. This is a tale not of innocent love, but of obsession, where the protagonist is clearly damaged and knows it. The Fall of Max Payne is more still, exploring recovery from loss and accepting that an injury, no matter how grievous, is not the end and that life can go on.
We'd only been married a short time. By now, she had been dead longer than I knew her. I still hadn't really forgiven myself for the Mona business, but I knew that was just grief. The insanity that comes with losing the life you had built.
Life can go on.
Far from the grim implications of the subtitle, Max Payne 2 is about recovery and accepting that moving on from someone dear may not be betrayal, but the simple need to live again. Number 2. Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. After the spectacular mess that was Metal Gear Solid 2, a jumbled game that was heavily reliant on its predecessor and filled with a hodgepodge of poorly substantiated ideas surrounding self-identity and Illuminati-esque conspiracy, it would be remarkable that Snake Eater was simply as good as it is. Snake Eater, as an experience, shines. The game's exploration of patriotism, loyalty, and betrayal make it among gaming's best titles, as the numerous cast members have a myriad of relationships with one another, through themes of mentor to protege, seducer or lover, and loyalist or traitor. While Snake Eater still features the staple of outlandish bosses that are trademarked to the series and could potentially make the game less approachable to an outside viewer, their diminished roles and development may in fact do the game more favors, allowing the plot to move forward and focus on characters who will be around throughout the story and grant them the attention they deserve. The plot is one of the few in the series whose dramatic merits are never crushed by the absurdity of the events surrounding it, and the final moments are both iconic and incredibly moving in light of the events preceding them. Snake Eater's themes are often intense and heartbreaking, and it remains some of the best gaming has to offer. Number 1. Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 has been around for over a decade, and its impact remains unmatched. While the oppressive atmosphere and crushing sense of isolation set the tone for the game, it's the way in which it expertly juggles half a dozen characters that is truly impressive. No one is wasted in Silent Hill 2. Even though there are never more than 2 characters on screen, every encounter is used to establish something about them, and every character is expertly developed for it, and each character ties into the overall events in some clearly pertinent way. Silent Hill 2's twisting narrative deals with themes of abuse, victimization, retaliation, whose core characters are not redeemed through confronting their tormentors, but made to suffer all the worse for violently escaping them. None of the characters are innocent, and all are made incredibly human for their flaws. More still, while the multiple core endings of the game may not be the finest in the genre or even the series, all serve to complement and interpret the protagonist in a way that not only benefits the story, but allows for flexible interpretations into the actions of the protagonist. Few games in both the series and the medium as a whole have come as close to matching what Silent Hill 2 did, and it may be quite a while longer before anything else comes to dethrone it. Owing to its many strengths in content and structure, Silent Hill 2 has one of the best narratives in gaming.
It doesn't matter who I am. I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real.
And that's my list for 10 of the best game narratives to date. Hopefully, as time goes, we'll get more titles that use the medium to tell memorable, compelling stories, and less of this.
I've been inside this arm all along, waiting for the right time to awaken.